Okay, hello and welcome back to another video in which today we're going to be starting a new series. I know that it's been 4 months since I made a video, but oh well, I just am very conditional. Now, I'm going to leech off of AdizzPro once more because I've been like a blood-sucking leech sticking to him and ripping him of all his ideas. And I'm going to make an alternate past of the world, this one being based on more colonial era. More specifically, the map which I'm using right now is a 1756 map of the world. Well, let's get into it. Okay, so I'm gonna start this video off with a bang. The major war that occurred in 1756 that everyone can remember is the 7 Years' War, and that is the map which I've just drawn right here. Let's get into it. First things first, I believe the Spanish would start pushing along the front into the Portuguese border, with them having a much more significant and strong military. And after a couple weeks of fighting, they would encircle Lisbon and end up capturing it. Okay, now I believe that the British, holding the advantageous area of America, would start pushing into New Brunswick over here and lock off the entrance into Nova Scotia and start pushing into the region of Quebec, and eventually end up capturing one side of the Quebec River. They cannot fully cut off supply though to the troops because the French garrisons on the other side of the Quebec River are very strong, and the Brits can't face that right now. While the Brits are pushing in the north, the Spaniards are focused on Brazil, and they start flowing their troops into the state of Amazonas in Brazil, and also the state of Roraima, I think. Sorry if I'm butchering it. And they would start heavily trying to push the Portuguese out of the war, having their homeland already captured, and having the government in exile in Brazil already getting a little bit antsy. They captured this region of jungle, which has absolutely zero troops stationed in it. I doubt that the Portuguese would station a lot of troops into it. And they crush all opposition within this region, and they make sure that they have their front lines well supplied and well equipped, using the ports in more northern Venezuela and more northern South America in general. Also, the French would make a small bulge off of French Guiana, but they will definitely not be able to do much damage, as this region is actually defended. Now, I believe that here, the Prussians, using their new advanced military and new found strength, which they had accomplished in the earlier parts of the 18th century, attack into Austria and do so successfully, capturing most of Czechia and sending the Austrian troops into a heavy rout. Now, I know this might be quite fast, but I don't think the Austrians would focus as much attention to their Prussian border without any means necessary, because this war was kind of out of the blue, as most of their troops, I believe, would be stationed on the Ottoman border and the southern flanks. Also, the Brits start to cut off the supply going into Europe, kind of what the continental system in the Napoleonic Wars wanted to do, and they start trying to starve out the French and cut their access off to their colonies so that they can capture all of Canada and all of these regions and all of the French colonies in general. Okay, now I believe that the war would start to turn into a rout for the Brits and the Prussians and the Portuguese, because I believe that the Spanish, French, and Austrian militaries, and the Russian ones, of course, would start sending in reinforcements to their attacked areas, such as the Austrians sending reinforcements to Bohemia, the French into Quebec and northern Canada, and the Spanish continuing their gradual push into Brazil. And I believe that in general, the English and the Prussians, contrary to reality, would lack the means necessary to continue the war. Now, the French would start pushing back into Canada and like New Brunswick and regain all of their Quebec lands. And I believe that they would even start pushing into a part of the United States with all of their military mobilized and ready now. I believe that they would start pushing into the states of, I believe this is Maine and Vermont and New Hampshire and all of those northern states. And also just slight advances into the 13 colonies. Now, the Spanish would start to crack down on the Brazilians, pushing far further into the Amazon than they already did, and using their full industry and military might, which at that time in the 1700s was still quite large, to just advance towards the coast in the important areas. And they would even start sending their important armies down to Rio Grande do Sul and those southern provinces, which actually meant a lot for the Portuguese. And I believe that the Spanish would in general be able to send the Portuguese forces into a rout with their superior numbers and still superior tactics and equipment and manpower and just everything in general, which the Spanish had during that era. Now, the Austrian troops, having moved their armies north finally to deal with the Prussians, and having had the Russian reinforcements arrive, start pushing back into Bohemia, capturing Prague after a very short time, and encircling some German troops around the Sudetenland, like the far west of the Sudetenland, and generally just capturing them. And they even started moving slightly into Silesia, having all their men and all their muskets on the ready to push towards Berlin. Okay, now I believe that we're into the final stretch of this war. Now, the French would push further into America, spearheading towards DC, and they managed to fully capture Washington, DC, and push America out of the war, forcing the Brits to ultimately surrender, as they know that the war can't drag on any further. And the Spaniards in Brazil start pushing up. They capture Rio de Janeiro, I think, hopefully, and they just overall spearhead up the coast. The Portuguese can't really resist it, and it surrenders. And with the Austrians nearing Berlin and all their allies gone, Prussia also surrenders to the enemies. Now, let's see what a peace treaty would look like with this alt history of the French and their allies actually winning the 7 Years' War instead of the Brits. Okay, so this is what the peace treaty looks like. First of all, the Austrians take Silesia from Prussia and make it much smaller and more vulnerable than it was before. Nextly, the French take mostly Maine and then a part of Northern America as contribution for the war, and they just make sure that they protect their northern flank more and get it more efficiently secured. And the Portuguese lose significant parts of Brazil, next the French Guyana, this part of around Venezuela and Guyana and all those, and also the Rio Grande do Sul region. And this is an unupdated alliance map of how the world looks right now. So the Spaniards, the French, and the Austrians are all allies. The Portuguese are their puppets because they puppeted the Spanish puppeted the Portuguese in Brazil to make sure that they cause no more threats. And the British and the Prussians remain firm as the last of the blue team. The Russians leave the red team. They see no reason for continuing it. And I'm gonna call the red team the French Alliance, and the blue one the North Sea Dominion. Okay, well, hope you had a nice day, and I'll see you in our next part. Goodbye.